of the most common aspects of living under government rule is complaining about that said government rule. Wherever one goes, citizens appear dissatisfied by a system supposedly created to satisfy them. The taxes are too high, the roads are rancid, the officials are too old, too polished, too brutish, or simply too stupid. In other words, the democratic citizen is perpetually discontented with the institutions that claim to represent him. This contempt is especially apparent within the American political organism. One does not need a microscope to perceive the country's distrust of Congress, the presidency, the courts, and nearly every bureaucratic appendage attached to them. And with the rise of unorthodox politics, from voters desiring leaders with little experience to those favoring brutes over mild-mannered, carefully coiffed Gavin Newsom types, it is increasingly difficult for the collective to agree upon systems established nearly 250 years ago. But what if it was not entirely up to the people to decide what was best for them? What if the government was truly based on merit, on the capability of those who rationally possess the most tools to make a nation succeed? This is where Chinese philosopher Tongdong trots in. Bai, a professor at Fudan University, is most famous, or infamous, for his seminal work against political equality, the Confucian case. He does not simply seek to completely dismantle democracy and reassert monarchy or authoritarianism, but he surely wants government to become more contingent upon the cranium. Even more than that, Bai questions the seeming unalienable maxim of one person, one vote, asking whether it has actual value merely because modern societies have repeated it into self-evidentiality. Bai begins with a Mencian distinction. Government may be for the people without being governed completely by the people. Quote-unquote for the people describes the purpose of government. The state should preserve security, provide material sustenance and education, and cultivate conditions for a morally serious life. By the people, however, describes a method of distributing political power. It assumes that because citizens possess equal moral worth, their political judgments should possess equal weight. Bai does not accept this leap. Mencian Confucianism holds that human beings share the potential for moral cultivation. Nevertheless, equal potential does not mean equal achievement. Some persons cultivate wisdom, compassion, experience, and practical judgment more fully than others. This is not to say that ordinary citizens are mindless. People can discern whether they are secure, impoverished, respected, or oppressed. However, knowing that one is suffering does not automatically divulge which monetary policy, environmental regulation, or constitutional arrangement that will end such suffering. The patient may know that the operation has failed. This does not qualify him to seize the scalpel. Bai, therefore, imagines government of the people and for the people, but only partly by the people, and partly by those who demonstrate the merit necessary to rule. To warrant such a controversial arrangement, Bai identifies four conundrums within one person, one vote. The first is anti-elitism and anti-intellectualism. Democracy is justified in distrusting entrenched elites. History is packed with aristocrats, monarchs, and clever moralists who use superiority to perpetuate their authority. Nevertheless, this suspicion can metastasize until expertise itself becomes politically repulsive. Candidates are not praised for comprehending government, but for appearing untouched by it. They campaign as outsiders seeking entrance into the institution they claim to despise. Knowledge becomes arrogance, ignorance becomes authenticity, and the common man is transformed from a citizen into a credential. We would never select an illiterate surgeon because he seems like someone with whom we can share a beer. Yet leaders responsible for war, taxation, public health, and constitutional order are frequently rewarded for appearing blissfully unburdened by knowledge. The second problem concerns non-voters. An election records the preferences of present and eligible voters. Policy, however, reaches children, resident aliens, foreigners, and future generations who cannot enter the polls. Climate change is the premier example. Future persons will inhabit the environment that present voters either preserve or desecrate, yet they possess no ballot with which to restrain us. The same applies to public debt, depleted resources, and protectionist policies that benefit domestic voters while harming workers abroad. Thus, one person, one vote does not consider every person affected. It merely gives votes to a temporary portion of them. The unborn are politically silent, and silence does not cancel suffering. The third problem is that the vocal and powerful triumph over the silent and silenced. This has been a problem that has been pointed out by people such as Plato and Alexis de Tocqueville. Formal equality at the ballot box does not produce equal political influence. Citizens may each possess one vote, but not the same wealth, free time, education, media access, institutional connections, or ability to threaten an office holder. Certain groups amplify their grievances until they masquerade as the general will. Others remain politically inaudible. The poor, migrants, minorities, and socially isolated possess a nominal vote while lacking the means to make it consequential. The ballot appears equal, but the conditions surrounding the ballot are manifestly different. The fourth, and, for Bai, most fatal problem is that voters may not understand their interests or how to satisfy them. In other words, they're not particularly great at choosing what is actually best for them. This need not mean that the average citizen is inherently unintelligent. Modern government is immensely complex and nuanced, while becoming informed requires an enormous expenditure of time. Yet one vote is exceedingly unlikely to determine a national election. It can therefore be perfectly rational for a citizen to remain politically ignorant. The private decision is rational, the public consequence is preposterous. Citizens may demand lower taxes, expanded services, balanced budgets, cheaper products, protected industries, and no personal sacrifice. Each desire makes sense alone, but together they can become fiscally fictitious. Democracy can count contradictory preferences. It cannot harmonize them. With these plights addressed, Bai does not answer these deficiencies by enthroning an emperor or asking everyone to bow before the contemporary Chinese state. His solution is a Confucian hybrid regime, that is, liberal constitutional protections joined to a stronger meritocratic element. First, the regime affirms the rule of law, human rights, freedom of speech, and access to information. These liberties are not decorative or ceremonial. Supposedly wise officials remain mutable, self-interested, and fallible. Without criticism, the meritocrat can confuse obedience with approval and silence with harmony. Second, government assumes responsibility for the material and moral well-being of the people. It should provide education, basic security, and the resources necessary for meaningful participation. Civic education would teach citizens not merely how to move, but how to consider the common good and respect genuine excellence. Third, democracy remains vigorous at the local level. Citizens ordinarily understand their roads, schools, police, and municipal officials more concretely than some distant administrator. Decentralized communities would therefore retain extensive autonomy and popular participation. At higher levels, however, the regime becomes more bicameral. Popularly elected lower house, the House of the People, expresses public satisfaction, dissatisfaction, and immediate interests. Beside it stands a meritocratic upper house composed of persons selected for knowledge, experience, judgment, and demonstrated concern for others. The two houses restrain one another. The popular chamber prevents meritocrats from constructing an exclusive club for clever people. The upper chamber protects long-term interests, non-voters, and minorities from the passion of a temporary majority. In other words, Bai does not seek to annihilate democracy. He seeks to ameliorate it. Popular will remains significant, but it is no longer treated as fallible. But the enterprise depends upon an arduous question. Who selects the capable? One possibility is plurality voting. Citizens with greater education or demonstrated competence could receive additional voting weight on higher-level matters. This preserves participation, but risks transforming educational inequality into political inequality. A wealthy citizen who received every academic opportunity may appear meritorious merely because society already favored him. Bai's first developed method is the leveled model. Citizens directly elect representatives at the strictly local level. These officials acquire experience and then become eligible to select, or be selected for, the upper chamber one level above them. The process continues upward until the highest level of government is reached. National authority would therefore emerge through successive demonstrations of service rather than one theatrical popularity contest. The second method is examination-based selection. A democratic lower house could be paired with an upper chamber whose candidates pass competitive examinations. However, Bai does not reduce merit to memorizing political trivia. Examinations could be joined with public academies, training in local offices, and evaluation of actual administrative performance. The paper test measures the cranium. Practical service attempts to examine the character attached to it. The third method is a quota system. Seats could be reserved for experienced local officials, scientists, labor organizers, nonprofit leaders, retired military officers, and others whose competence and morality have been tested through sustained service. This is Bai's attempted moral examination beyond paper. A scientist may display devotion to evidence. A public servant may demonstrate for the Commonwealth. An organizer may reveal an ability to understand people whom ordinary institutions neglect. These systems can be combined, but selection must remain open, protected by law, supported by broad education, and mobile rather than hereditary. Otherwise, meritocracy becomes aristocracy with a standardized test. After all of that has been divulged, Bai's solution still bears a gargantuan vulnerability. Who writes the examination? Who defines intelligence? Who determines whether a politician is compassionate, and what prevents the supposedly compassionate from using their moral status to dominate everyone else? The capable may govern better. They may also become capable of defending their own power with far more sophistication than the average brute. Examinations can reward conformity. Professional quotas can fossilize into privilege. An elite chamber may dismiss every public objection as another exhibition of popular ignorance. Competence would no longer check power. It would merely supply power with superior vocabulary. Bai attempts to restrain this danger through law, rights, free speech, a popularly elected chamber, and internal diversity. Yet no arrangement can completely abolish paternalism. This leaves us with two competing absurdities. Democracy may distribute authority to citizens who possess neither the time nor the information to exercise it well. Meritocracy may distribute authority to experts who believe their information excuses them from accountability. Democracy asks, "Who gave you the right to rule me?" Meritocracy responds, "What makes you qualified to rule anyone?" Bai does not prove that people should surrender government to an examination hall. He does, however, vanquish the lazy presumption that equal moral worth automatically necessitates equal political authority. Perhaps the finest regime is neither government merely by experts nor merely by opinion, but an uneasy balance of consent and cultivation, the ballot and the book, the people and the capable. A government contingent upon the cranium may indeed govern more rationally, but the cranium without the heart can become merely a more intelligent tyrant.